UFC Saudi Arabia is in the books, so now we got UFC 312 coming up in a couple days. On Saturday, it'll be main event, Dricus du Plessis vs. Sean Strickland 2. Rematch, kind of set things straight, finish that story. Co-main event, Zhang Weili, Tatiana Suarez, which that's actually a really good fight. But really right now I'm going to be talking about the main event, Dricus versus Strickland. It's really interesting because both guys are going to have an advantage coming into this rematch. Because, they're both pretty awkward, but it's going to be who's going to make more adjustments. They're really both going to have an advantage since they've both felt each other already. I would think that Dricus would make more adjustments. I feel like they game plan a little more specifically for their opponent, better than Strickland would. But then I've been watching kind of the interviews. Eric Nixick, who is a great coach, one of the best in the world at Extreme Couture, who's Strickland's coach. And he talked about the rematch, and he was explaining all the stuff that they really haven't done with Sean recently, like drilling and, watching film, like stuff that they never really did. Sean didn't really like to do. But now they're starting to do it for this fight, which I think is actually huge. I was watching the interview. It was Bisping and Paul Felder interviewed Eric Nixick. And they were talking to him, and Eric Nixick was talking about whenever they were watching film for the first time, like rewatching the first fight. And he was watching it with Sean. And he said that after the fight was done, the first thing Sean said was, "I got outdogged," which really is kind of what happened. Strickland was the more efficient fighter, kind of landing at a higher percentage, but Dricus was going after him, throwing head kicks, haymakers, going for takedowns, and really that won him the fight. So I think it is, that's kind of huge for Sean to it, because also Sean's been saying, about the blood, which, actually is, an important factor, but really he did get overwhelmed a little bit. So the fact that he knows that, and that they're preparing for that, I think that's huge. And he also just recently talked about on ESPN MMA, which I just watched, that just came out today. He acknowledges that the judges don't really care as much about if you pretty much dodge every punch and land yours at a higher percentage, kind of like Floyd Mayweather, that boxing sort of style. They don't really care about that. It's more about you're being aggressive, you're trying to finish the fight. That's what they kind of favor. And that's what he was talking about, that he acknowledges that. And that kind of for this fight, he needs to put the pressure on him more and needs to kind of take more chances. I think that's huge because really, if he would have done that the first fight, I think he clearly wins. So that's where it's kind of weird because I feel like Strickland is going to be a lot more prepared, and I think he's going to be a lot more aggressive, which I think really is all he needed to do to beat Dricus. But then I don't know if Dricus seems to prepare very well and he's really intelligent, even though he fights like he's stupid. He seems like the way that he studies film, and he also has a great coach. They prepare really well too. It's going to be interesting because I feel like they both have prepared really well. In terms of a prediction and a pick, I'm going to go with Sean Strickland by unanimous decision because I really don't know what more Dricus can do. Because in the first fight, Dricus did what he was supposed to do. He executed the perfect game plan. Throwing haymakers, throwing head kicks, going for takedowns, putting him on the back foot, pressuring him. And he did that for almost all 5 rounds. And it was still a split decision that Strickland arguably won. So it's what more can Dricus do? And then for Strickland, we all know that there was a lot more that he could have done. And it seems like him and Nixick have kind of game planned and have adjusted to that and are going to be more aggressive. And they've talked about using the wrestling because Strickland does have a really good ground game that he really doesn't use. He just wants to stand up and only strike. But he's always had really good grappling, but just doesn't use it. So I think that's huge that if he would be more aggressive and he would engage in the wrestling, I think he beats Dricus. And I think another interesting point is that Dricus talked about how in the first and second round, he kind of took it lightly a little bit. That he was, his first title fight, didn't want to just go for it. But he wanted to be a little smarter and not just go at him. And that in the third, fourth, and fifth round, he kind of went at him. Since he kind of felt him the first 2 rounds and he felt like he knew what he was doing. Which I think that might hurt him though in the second fight. If it's a full 5-rounder, I don't think that Dricus can finish Sean. Because I think Sean has a really underrated chin. And the only guy that he's been knocked out by at middleweight is Alex Pereira, which, that's not that bad. But besides him, he's never been knocked out, never been finished. He's never been submitted in his career. So And also, I mean, his defense is always so good. Like, he's so hard to hit clean. And really, in the last fight, Dricus didn't hit him until he got the cut. Like, before, which obviously Dricus caused the cut. So, like, that's good for him. Like, yeah. But before that, he really wasn't hitting him. I don't see Dricus finishing Strickland. And I honestly don't see Strickland finishing Dricus either, because, I mean, he doesn't really have knockout power. I mean, unless he tries to go for a submission and he kind of shocks everybody. But I see this fight going to a decision. But like what I was saying before, now that he feels like he's figured him out, he's going to try to do the same thing that he was doing later in the fight, just going after him, throwing haymakers, like from the beginning in the first 2 rounds. Which I think, honestly, is going to hurt him because he's going to be more tired in the later rounds. Last time, since he was not really going 100% the first 2 rounds, that kind of allowed him to have such high activity in the later rounds. But I mean, if he's starting to do that early in the fight, then he might kind of gas out. Like against Izzy, I mean, he was being pretty aggressive the first 2 rounds with going for takedowns, throwing haymakers, like he said he's going to do in this rematch with Strickland at the beginning. But then we saw in the 3rd, 4th round where he kind of, like, he looked gassed a little bit. So I don't know if that's going to be sort of the same thing where he thinks he can go out and finish Strickland, and he really probably can't, and then you get to the championship rounds, and it almost turns out how people thought it would the first time, where, like, the first time I thought Dricus would gas out in the first few rounds, and then Strickland would kind of put it on him later. I kind of see that happening maybe now, because, first of all, Strickland's going to be more aggressive all 5 rounds. He knows that he has to put the pressure on him. And then Dricus, which we know Strickland's not going to get tired. He never gets tired. And then Dricus, the fact that he's going to be throwing haymakers, going for takedowns, like, you know, going all out, like, at the beginning, that might hurt him. Like, he's going to start, you know, fading a little bit probably in the championship round since he thinks he can finish him right away. Or, like, early in the fight. Considering all those things, I kind of lean towards Sean. Because then it is also a different thing where, against Dricus the first time, he has the belt, and he fought not to lose. Against Izzy, he fought with nothing to lose. That's what his coach Eric Nixick was saying, which I think is true. And like now, he knows that the first fight was close. He knows that he could have convincingly won that fight if he was more aggressive. He knows the judges aren't going to want him just jabbing and teeping. I really do think he's going to throw more haymakers. He's going to be more aggressive. He's going to go for takedowns as well, or at least engage in the wrestling. I think the fact that he has nothing to lose and that he's trying to get the title back, trying to get his revenge, because he truly believes that he's better than Dricus, knowing that the judges are not going to like him just jabbing and teeping, that he has to be more aggressive and he has to go for it a little bit more. I think he has that ability, because like if you watch the 5th round, when he kind of knew it was either, like, no matter what, he had to win this round. He was either losing or it was tied. He had to win it. And even for Dricus, he knew that he could have been winning or it could be tied. So, like, you don't want to take a chance. Like, you want to win this round. And the fact that Strickland overwhelmed him, put the pressure on him, was throwing haymakers, and he won that 5th round, I think that kind of shows he possesses that ability. So I think with everything that he knows now, I think he has the advantage, and I think he will win. I wouldn't be surprised if Dricus won, but I just think that since Dricus did everything that he could in that first fight, and it was a split decision, and that Strickland could have done way more. Because, like, really, Strickland, all he did was jab and teep that whole time. Dricus went for takedowns, threw head kicks, was throwing haymakers, leg kicks, body kicks. I mean, he did everything that you could do. Pressured him, overwhelmed him. And it was still a split decision. I just think that Strickland has so much more that he can do, and that he has more of the advantage. I'm so excited to see, because it really was a close fight. And it'll finally, I just hope that it's a convincing outcome, so that there's no questions asked, we know who better, and that we can just move on. So that's my official prediction. I think Sean Strickland wins by unanimous decision. Maybe like 48-47, 48-47, and 49-46, something like that. But I think that Sean Strickland will convincingly win this fight. So we're only 6 days away. We're going to be getting press conferences, the weigh-ins, interviews. It's all going to be hype, which I think people are going to be more hyped about this fight the closer that we get to it. But I'm excited. I mean, the UFC never disappoints. Even though the card is going to be that good, I mean, anytime that there's a card with not as many big names, it sometimes turns out to be like a banger card in terms of the entertainment of the fights. So I'm excited. We don't got much time left, and I'm going to be making more videos. I'm going to make like a hype video kind of for the main event and stuff like that, and do a couple more videos. I'll put out fights from other guys on the card, and yeah, I can't wait. So stay tuned for some more videos. We're out.